Tripped on a cloud and fell 8 miles high. I tore my mind on a jagged sky. I just dropped in to see what condition my condition was in.
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah, what condition my condition was in.
As I've mentioned in the past, flea markets are a great place to find tons of retro collectibles at an affordable price, including games. On our way to Orlando, the Osceola Flea Market is said to be the biggest one in the area with over 900 booths and tons of variety. Going out to a foreign land is always a blind journey, and you must use online reviews and advertisements to make your decisions on where you go. Really? That's it? From a glance, this place barely looked like a broken down excuse for a neighborhood garage sale, let alone the largest flea market in the area. Talk about a huge disappointment. I never fret though, and started to search the 20 to 30 booths for some games while my wife looked for her normal finds. The first gaming place I came up to had a lady with her son, and she was obviously a reseller, saying that all the games are different prices. When games are individually marked, it is always discouraging as you are less likely to get a deal that way. After talking with her, she was actually really cool, and I realized that she'd be interested in trading some games that I just happened to have in my car, which I need to get rid of. She had a couple of must-have games that are on my to-buy list. First up is Brain Lord, which is a little-known action RPG and a decent find. Second was an amazing find in Super Metroid. Unfortunately, it's the player's choice version. However, getting the game at all is a good find for me. Beggars can't be choosers. How much did I pay for both games, which can run upwards of $60 online? $5 and 20 NES and Super NES doubles that I traded in, which consisted mostly of sports games. Talk about a deal. The second place I came across was another obvious reseller. I knew right away that this guy had a real bad attitude. There's nothing worse, sellers, than being an asshole to your potential buyers. Anyhow, I saw a game I was interested in and did the normal thing I do when I want a game for cheap. I ask about other games I'm not interested in first. So I asked him how much a few NES games were, like Dick Tracy that I saw over there, Super Mario Bros. And Hogan's Alley, and he was in the $10 to $15 price range each time. Finally, I went to the game I wanted, Kid Icarus, and he said $7. Score! From there, I saw Dr. Franken 2 for Game Boy that interested me because I have a prototype for the NES, as well as the SNES version. The guy looked at me and said, give me $17 for both. Really? $10 for a Game Boy game that was maybe worth $2? No way I was paying that much. I decided to offer him a reasonable counteroffer. I said, how about $10 for both games, since Game Boy games are usually worth only $1 or $2? He said $15, which is a dickhead bartering move. So I ended up just getting Kid Icarus, which is a game that has been eluding me for years now. Good riddance, douche seller. The final place that had games at this flea market was in the middle of an aisle with no one attending it. My wife immediately noticed a classic leather Nintendo game case on the top of the kiosk. Not seeing anyone remotely working there, I asked a lady selling some perfume next to the place if she knew who was running this booth, and she said she was the one running it. Obviously, she didn't know much about games, but had them individually priced anyhow just to piss on my dreams. She told me that the case was $7, which was a good number for me, so I said sure. I only had a $20 bill, and she looked panicked when I handed it to her. So what did I do in this situation? I already saw a few overpriced games that I had my eye on, so I said, how about I throw in this copy of D for PlayStation 1 for $10 total? After thinking for a moment, she said sure, as she could easily get me 2 5s for change. Of course, the great thing was, she wanted $9 for D alone, which can go upwards of $30 for a complete version online, which is what she had. So I essentially made off like a happy bandit. It was a great finale to the flea market adventure in Orlando. You always got to remember that just because the place is small, doesn't mean that it's a complete wash, especially if you don't know the area. Fortunately, my Orlando game collecting adventure wasn't over. The main game collector attraction out in Orlando is a place called Game World, which has droves and droves of retro games. Unfortunately, the place has been closed down for months for remodeling, which I didn't realize until we drove to the place and it was empty. It wasn't that big of a deal since it was on our way to where we were going. However, it always sucks to get your hopes up for such an amazing place just to find out that they have moved and aren't open yet. We looked into another used video game place that carries retro games called Play and Trade, which is a chain. However, the phone number is disconnected. All hope at finding any more gaming treats seemed lost. Even when the flea market and other places don't pan out, I never give up hope though, as a gaming gold mine could be just around the corner. Luckily, my wife is reasonable and very supportive of my condition. She suggested that we try one more place. There was one more Play and Trade on the map, and was about 15 miles away, so we gave it a chance. Luckily, it was open and the store was full of games. I also had a Creative Games with me, sans the SNES and NES games which I'd gotten rid of earlier, that I had planned to trade in at Game World, so I brought those in to get some trading credit for my purchases. While they evaluated my games, I went on the hunt. First thing I noticed was the SNES games and 2 games at the top which I knew I didn't have in my collection. Skyblazer and Blackthorn, which are both classic, virtually unknown platformers for the SNES and are must-haves for my collection. Next thing I noticed was on the other side of the store, where another customer had the Game Boy Advance games case open. Took that opportunity to look at the games and immediately saw Tales of Fantasia, the SNES RPG classic that never got a US release for the Game Boy Advance. I looked on the back and it said only $5. The next game I saw was an RPG shoot-'em-up hybrid called Sigma Star Saga, which I had reviewed in the past, with its purple Noid main character. Another $5 game. I'm liking these prices for the portable games. I also saw Shining Soul, which is an Altis action RPG, and it is also on my must-have list. Again, $5. Lastly, I saw Donkey Kong Land 3, which was the last of the Game Boy Donkey Kong Land trilogy that I needed to get my hands on for completion. After that, I was over to the Nintendo 64 games, and I found a copy of the action RPG masterpiece Hybrid Heaven for a reasonable price, as well as the kitschy platformer Gex 64, which is a game series I've always enjoyed. I also noticed there was a copy of 1080 Avalanche for the GameCube, which was a couple dollars, so I picked up that one as well. Going back over to where they were counting up my games, I noticed some PS1 games sitting there on the shelf. First game I saw was a game called Pinobi, which from the back looked like a beautiful 2D platformer, so I put it in my pile as the PS1 is known for having some unknown gems on it. The other games I ended up getting were Blaster Master Blasting Again and Bubsy 3D, which are a couple more games that are on my to get list. So after all that time I spent hunting, they finished tallying up my games, which consisted of Atari 2600 game and a bunch of randoms I've gotten in lots over the past year. The total was around $35 worth of credit, which took a huge chunk off the price of my new games. All in all, this was a great adventure in game collecting, and now it's time to go through all my treats and play some games.
Yeah, oh yeah, what condition my condition was in.